My name is Stefan, and I will talk about SQUIP exploiting the scheduler queue contention side channel. Collaborative work with all the nice people here that are written on the slide. What is all this about? So here on these slides, you can see two different CPU backend designs, which appear quite similar but are a little bit different. Especially, you see this red box, these red boxes, the schedulers, which are split on AMD Zen processors, but unified on Intel Skylake processors. And our question basically was whether we can exploit the split scheduler design of AMD processors. The answer is yes, but what do we want to do? Well, okay, we have an attacker and a victim, both run on the same core on different SMT threads. And the attacker wants to observe what the victim is doing, but the attacker doesn't have any architectural means to access what the victim is doing. In particular, the attacker wants to observe when the victim is performing multiplications. And because there is no architectural access from the attacker to the victim, the attacker has to use a side channel, and in our case, we are using a timing side channel. How does all this work? And you just saw this backend of the CPU. Let's go into it in a little bit more detail. So starting from the top of this figure, you see two instruction streams. These are two because we have two hyperthreads. These instruction streams go into the front end, and in the front end, the instructions are decoded into so-called micro-operations or micro-ops. These micro-ops are forwarded to the entire control unit, and from there on they go to the different schedulers. All the schedulers have a limited capacity of a certain amount of micro-operations. And in our case, we are interested in the scheduler that is connected to the arithmetic logical unit 1, because not all the ALUs are the same. Some of them are specialized, and in our case, the arithmetic logical unit 1 is the one and the only one that is able to perform multiplications. This is the figure for Zen 2. On Zen 3, it's a little bit different, but we still have one scheduler queue that takes all the multiplications that come from the retire control unit. What do we want to do? Yeah, we basically want to create a traffic jam inside the CPU, if you want to put it that way. So we turn the traffic lights for the left turners to red. And as you can see here, if we do not exceed the capacity of the scheduler queue, then subsequent operations can follow up quickly. On the other hand, if we exceed the capacity, then the subsequent operations have to wait. To put it into more technical terms, what does happen here? So in the first case, we see in the retire control unit, we see one operation, one multiplication that can go into the scheduler queue for ALU1. And the subsequent operation, the RDPOU instruction, can go to the other scheduler queue because there is still some space left, and also the execution can continue in parallel, so everything is fine. But on the other hand, what happens if the queue for the multiplications is already full? In that case, the additional multiplication can, of course, not be enqueued because there's no room for that operation, and because there's no reordering done in the retire control unit. The subsequent operation that is not a multiplication cannot be enqueued either, and the pipeline stalls, meaning that the CPU has to wait until there's some room free for the multiplication again. So some background more about that. So we want to exploit the timing side channel. For time measurements, we can use the well-known RDTSC instruction, or on AMD, there's also the RDPOU instruction, which is a little bit more exact. So what do we typically do? Well, okay, we have this RDTSC instruction, and we have some code we want to measure, and we just surround the code we want to measure by this instruction. But then there is out-of-order execution, meaning that the RDTSC can be executed earlier or later than we actually want. The typical solution for that is to use some serializing instructions or fences in order to avoid out-of-order execution at that point. We don't do that here. It's annoying, and instead we actually exploit whether we exploit that we can observe whether an RDTSC instruction or RDPOU instruction is executed out of order or not. We can write some code for that. So what do we do? Again, first of all, we want to start with an empty scheduler queue. So there are different ways to do that. One simple way is to just execute a delay loop that gives the scheduler queue some time to empty. We then fill the scheduler queue to the desired level. Of course, multiplications are executed quite fast on modern processors, so we have to delay them a little bit. How do we do that? Well, we just make them dependent on some long latency operations, and then we basically just add the reading of the time. This actually works, so we can observe that on Zen 2 we have a scheduler queue capacity of 16 microops. On Zen 3 we have 22 microops that we can see, and in opposition to that, on Intel processors we don't see that limit at all, because we have a larger unified scheduler for all the micro operations. We can also observe this across hyperthreads. So what do we do? Well, we build a simple sender that in an alternating way executes some knobs or some multiplications, and on the receiver, well, we just record the the signal over time. And you can see on Zen 2, we get a nice clear signal out of that. On Zen 3, it's a little bit noisier, but still fine for us. So this allowed us to build a cover channel with that. I don't know whether it's recognizable here, but you can see, well, okay, in the end, in the bottom of the left window, you can see, well, okay, it works quite reliable. The only thing that's missing is a single bit at the end. Of course, if we run it a little bit longer, then we get more noise that accumulates from the system. But again, it's on one side, it's quite fast, so we can achieve up to 2.7 megabits per second at a reasonable, actually quite low error rate. This is cross-process. Of course, it also works cross-VM. And yeah, cross-VM, we have to reduce the transfer rate a little bit to get, because we have more noise from the hypervisor and stuff like that. It also works across. It also works with SEV enabled, and we can attack RSA with that, the square and multiply, because if we multiply for 1 in the exponent, then we have more multiplications that we can observe. We can recover the key with that. As you can see here, basically we just we see the ones in the exponent as a peak in the signal, and we can see how many zeros are between the peaks by just measuring the distance. This also works quite well. We need about 40 minutes to recover the key with a quite low error rate. There are some countermeasures described in the paper, and with that I want to finish because I'm running out of time. Thanks.
Thank you very much for a nice talk. We have time for questions. So then let me begin.
Yes.
So to share the scheduler queue, you need to run on the same core. So
yes.
If you disable SMT, that would be the obvious choice.
Yes. Yes. Of course, it's also possible to using the disabling SMT is kind of the big hammer. You can, of course, do this more selectively by using core scheduling or something like that. So you just have processes running from the same security domain running on the processor at the same time.
Yep. Other questions from the audience? If not, in the interest of time, I'd say let's thank Stefan again.
Thanks.